Now that we've had a chance to factor quadratics last week, and we've gotten really good at that, as was evidenced by our quiz scores, we're going to go ahead and solve quadratics this week. The first type we're going to see is ones where they're already in factored form. So step one is going to be, let's set each parenthesis equal to 0. That means that, if you notice, this used to be y. Now we're just starting off with it being 0, and this is going to look like finding the zeros like we did 2 weeks ago. So we've got 3x minus 2 equal to 0, and we have 5x plus 2 equal to 0. Our next step is going to be to solve each equation. So here we're going to add 2 to both sides to give me 3x equals 2, and then divide both sides by 3 to get x equals 2/3. Then with the other half, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides to give me 5x equals -2. Divide both sides by 5 to get x equals -2/5. So then that final step is going to be write them as an ordered pair, just like we had to do when we solved for zeros, which means that my first one is going to be 2/3 0, and my other one will be -2/5 0. Now for this second one, I want you to go ahead and work this one out on your own and press pause on the video while you're doing it. And then as soon as you are done, come back and check. All right, let's see how you did. We first set them up equal to 0, so 4x plus 7 equal to 0, and 2x plus 9 equal to 0. Then we'll go ahead and solve each of them. Subtract 7 from both sides to get 4x equals -7. Divide both sides by 4 to get x equals -7/4. Now if you want to change that into a mixed number, please feel free to. That would be -1 3/4. I am going to just leave it because we're not worried about graphing right now, so we can just leave it as is. So we get -7/4 0. For the next one, we subtract 9 from both sides to get 2x equals -9. Then we divide both sides by 2 to get x equals -9/2. And so we have -9/2, 0. Please make sure you're showing all your work because most of you are not strong enough yet at multi-step equations to be able to skip all the work. The other type of problem you're going to see is where it's not already in factored form. So when we start in standard form, the first thing we're going to do is factor that quadratic. So we need to make our t-table. For our t-table, we need to multiply to 39, and we need to add to -16. I ask that you please make sure that you're putting your multiplication sign and your addition sign into this, because there were those of you who lost points on the quiz last week. That the reason why is because you didn't put those in and then you flip-flopped them. So when I look here, I know 39 is a hard one, so I know that I'm going to go 13 times 3 because I know that's 39. But 13 plus 3 is +16, so that doesn't work. So I know that I probably need to go -13 times -3, because -13 plus -3 is -16. So I know that I've got, and this should have an equal 0 here, I know that I now have x minus 13 times x minus 3, that's equal to 0. And then the steps follow like we've been doing. Set each one equal to 0, so now we've got x minus 13 equal to 0, and we have x minus 3 equal to 0. So when we solve these, adding 13, and if you can jump right to the solution from here without showing the work on these one-step ones, you can do so. So I get x equals 13, and on the other one, adding 3 on both sides to get x equals 3. So then, now that we've had a chance to solve the equation, we're going to write our solutions as ordered pairs, which means that we're going to have 13, 0, and we're going to have 3, 0. Now let's look at this next one. This next one, you've got that beautiful little negative in front of the x squared. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to factor that out. Please make sure when you factor that out that you don't forget about it, because that was the other thing a lot of people lost points on, is dropping that coefficient. So now we've got x squared minus 19x minus 20. So I need to make my t-table. I need to multiply to negative 20. I need to add to negative 19. Well, being that that's that huge big of a gap, I know that my two numbers need to be very far apart, and one needs to be positive, one needs to be negative. And because this one is negative, I know that it needs to be the bigger number. So I'm going to do negative 20 times negative 1. Positive 1. Negative 20 plus 1 is negative 19, so I did find my right numbers, which means my factored form is negative x minus 20 times x plus 1. Now, the big thing here, remember, is that while this is important, it is not important when it comes to solving the quadratic, because we're looking solely at these two parts of our factored form binomials. So we have here x minus 20 equal to 0, which is x equals 20, which means my ordered pair is 20, 0. The other one is x plus 1 equal to 0, which I know is x equals negative 1, which means my other ordered pair is negative 1, 0. Looking at a couple more examples, this one we've got the 2. I want you to pause, factor like you know how to, and solve it, and then come back and check. Alright, so first we're going to factor that 2 out, leaving me with x squared plus 14x plus, this one's a little bit harder, half of 90 is 45, half of 8 is 4, so this is 49. I make my t-table. I need to multiply to 49, add to 14, and I know that that's 7 and 7. So I get 2 times x plus 7 times x plus 7. And being that they are both identical, you don't have to solve it twice because that would be redundant. So you simply say x plus 7 equals 0. So x equals negative 7, which means this particular graph of the quadratic is only going to cross the x-axis once, which means that that will be at negative 7, 0. Let's finally, this last one, I want you to pause it again, see if you can solve this one. This one's a little bit trickier, and then we'll come back to it. Alright, first thing I need to do is I need to rewrite this as negative 4x squared plus 36x plus 0, and this equals 0. So now the next thing I want to do is factor out that negative 4. So when I factor the negative 4 out, I'm left with x squared minus 9x, still plus 0, equal to 0. I make my t-table, I need to multiply to 0, and I need to add to negative 9. So that means I'm going to take negative 9 times 0, because 0 plus negative 9 does equal negative 9, which means my factored form has the negative 4 up front, and we have x plus 0 times x minus 9. And if you recall, the nice part here is we can simplify, and this is why it was so important that we simplified last week when we talked about these. So this ends up being negative 4 times x minus 9 equal to 0. So now this means that either negative 4x equals 0 or x minus 9 equals 0. This one, x equals 9, which means 9, 0 is your ordered pair. Here we're going to divide by negative 4. 0 divided by anything is 0. So x equals 0, which means that my ordered pair goes through the origin, which is 0, 0. What I need you to do now is go ahead and solve these two U-try problems. Please bring them to class with you tomorrow and bring any questions with you. I am hoping that all of you have watched this video, being that we've been struggling with that link.